Record. Yeah. Okay. All right. So chapter 21. Man, I remember when I was 21. That was a long time ago. Okay. So the book starts with the definitions of what hyperechoic, hypoechoic, and all that stuff. Isoechoic, homogeneous, heterogeneous. You should read into that. There's really no reason for me to go into that, and I don't really think it's a focus of the SPI, to be honest. Then they go into the 6 assumptions of an imaging system. Okay, you don't really need to know that either. This is just sort of setting you up to tell you, hey, these artifacts that you're about to read break these assumptions that we make. So for instance, just one example, assumption 3 says that sound travels in soft tissue at exactly 1540 meters per second. And everywhere in the formulas where we see propagation speed, we write it as 1540 meters per second. That is the assumption we make. That is what we mark as true. Okay. Some of these artifacts break that assumption, meaning that some tissues will not, the sound will not travel at 1540 meters per second in some of these tissues. Okay, and that's how it breaks that assumption. So think of it as it's breaking a rule. And that's how artifacts are created. It's something that's there that shouldn't be there. Okay, and it's because it broke a rule, right? A rule that we made, but it broke that rule. So then things are not what they should be because now the rule is broken. So now it may be harder to predict something. Okay. So in this 1540, and I'll do that artifact later, it talks about how if the tissue has a different speed, depending on how that speed is, the reflection comes back at a different time. And if the reflection comes back at a different time, it has a different timestamp on it. And because it has a different timestamp on it, remember that the ultrasound uh, places the location of a reflector depending on the time that it took to come back. And that's where we get that 13 microsecond rule. So this is where it assumes the location is based on that time. So if this tissue came back at a different time than it should have been, well, then that location is going to be off. It's either going to be more shallow or deeper. But either way, it's going to be off. It's not going to be what it actually is in the body. Okay, so that is what artifacts are. We have these rules that we kind of follow, and then the man, I'm craving some ice cream. We have these rules that we have these rules that we kind of follow, and then these artifacts say, well, I'm going to bend that a little bit. Okay, so artifacts, the funny thing about artifacts is that we kind of see them as bad, but in some circumstances, you better see an artifact. And once I get to that, I'll point it out. So if you ever do lung ultrasound, right, which you never hear of, right, because we always say, oh, we cannot see through air, which is true. We cannot see through air, but you can actually do lung ultrasounds, and lungs are supposed to give you certain artifacts. So if you're doing a lung and that artifact that you're supposed to see in lungs because of air is not there, then you say, wait, so what's wrong with my air? What's wrong with my air in my lungs? So that's how it's crazy how artifacts actually help you out, So if you have pneumonia, right? Or if you have pleural effusion. So if you have pleural effusion, there's liquid. So certain artifacts are going to be gone because those artifacts are caused by air, but now there's liquid there. So then you'll have a different artifact and you're like, wait, why am I getting this different artifact? Or if you have pneumonia, it's also liquid in there, but sometimes it gets thickened, if I'm not mistaken. Or if it's blood in there. Okay, so then you start then you start seeing different things. So yeah, artifacts are, I mean, I think they're pretty cool, to be honest. And sometimes you don't want them, don't get me wrong. So just learn how to appreciate them when you're supposed to, Okay. The first one is reverberation. It's very simple, very straightforward. This one is equally spaced bright lines, and they go deeper into the body. They're caused by a bright reflector. Okay, that's what they're caused by, a bright reflector. So you basically have this bright reflector, which is not going to be black, it'll be bright white, but you have this bright reflector. And then deeper to that bright reflector, you're going to have that same bright reflector repeat over and over and over again, deeper into the body. Okay. And it has something to do with the bouncing of the wave. The wave bounces back between this bright reflector. It bounces back multiple times. And every time it bounces back a different time, the reflection makes it to the machine a little bit later because it bounced back, then it went back, then it went to the machine. Then it bounced back again, then it went back, then it went to the machine. So each line is displaced deeper because each of these reflections that is bouncing back takes a little bit longer to get to the machine. And because it takes a little bit longer, the machine says, oh, you must be deeper. Because if you are farther away, it will take you longer to come back to me. Okay, time and distance, remember. I would say that you don't have to go into that much detail for the SPI. If you can just remember the name and these 3 bullet points, that should be fine, to be honest. Okay, there's really nothing else that I would say you need to know for reverberation. So reverberation is a very simple one, and it's very easy to spot because there's nothing else that looks like it. So it's not like you get confused by reverberation. So just like that, 1 down. The next one is comet tail. So comet tail looks like if we have a comet and the comet leaves behind a trail, like a shooting star. The way that it looks in the book is you have this bright beam going deeper into body. So it looks like something is there, and then you have this bright beam going down into the body. Okay, this bright beam. It is normally caused by either gas, which is air, or something that is metal. So remember when I spoke about lung ultrasounds? This is what we look for in lung ultrasound. We look for this comet tail artifact because then that means that there's air there, and there should be air in your lungs. And then metal, if you in echo, that kind of tends to be the common one. When you have a valve replacement, then some valves are metal, so then they get replaced by this metal, and then you'll see this comet tail artifact. So another name for it is ring down artifact. Okay, ring down artifact. But essentially, this is what you want to look for. You want to look for this hyperechoic beam. I call it like the UFO. So imagine that you had like a little UFO up here, and then it shoots down a little white beam, and then here goes like a poor cow, right? Like it's like sucked up. Yeah, ring down artifact is the same thing as comet tail. So you have this little UFO shoots out this beam, and then there goes your poor little cow, going up. Okay, so that's the way I like to think about it. You can think about an actual shooting star that leaves a white trail behind. So that's comet tail. Okay. I don't think there's anything that looks like comet tail, to be honest. Anything else that looks like comet tail. So there really isn't any other, like it shouldn't be something that you would confuse. After this, the book brings up shadow. So a shadow, yeah, the cow. So a shadow, let me put a little moo. There you go. So um, the shadow is exactly that. So this is the easiest one for us to spot when there's a shadow. The reason why you get shadow is because whatever tissue is causing it has high attenuation. And remember that attenuation is the weakening of a wave. So a wave that gets weaker gets darker. And that's why you got a shadow, because your wave got really weak and therefore it became really dark. Now, shadows are also one of those that there is an important artifact, just like comet tail for lungs. So imagine that you have bone, okay? Let's say you're scanning OB, a baby, and babies have all these bones in the womb. And you're scanning the femur or the humerus, one of the big bones that you're scanning. And you scan it and you don't see a shadow behind that bone. It's a problem. Okay, it's a problem. Something is wrong with that bone. And chances are that it's not dense enough. And then now you're looking at a possible condition. Okay, so we always kind of think of shadows as they're getting in the way. But in some situations, you need to see a shadow. And in bones is the perfect example that I can think of, that you need to see that shadow in the bone. Okay. So the wave comes down, hits this bone, it gets absorbed, it gets reflected, and the wave doesn't make it to the other side. And because nothing makes it to the other side, the machine doesn't know what's there. And that's why it creates this shadow. Because no wave was able to make it there. So how can I show you what's there? Right? Your eyes were not able to make it there. So I cannot put tissue there. I can't put anything there. I don't see it. And that's why it becomes a shadow. Another example is in the gallbladder or even in the bladder, and you have a little stone. That stone, if it's hardened enough by iron, it's hardened enough, you'll get a shadow. Okay. If you see something that's hyperechoic and bright, but there's no shadow, then it kind of makes you question if it's a stone. Because I know, I mean, I took general in school. I don't remember it as much, but I know something called a sludge ball, and it looks hyperechoic, not as bright, but it looks hyperechoic, and it's called a sludge ball, but it does not give you a shadow because it's not hardened. All right. So again, learn how to appreciate artifacts because they do give you, if you know why they happen and when they happen, then when a situation arises, sometimes you're like, oh, wait, I should see an artifact here. Why aren't I seeing it? So it's caused by high attenuation. All right. And then it's very simple that you'll see this shadow, behind that tissue or that bone or that stone that's causing the attenuation. You'll see it behind it, posterior to it. So that's shadow. The other one is edge shadow. So edge shadow actually gives you the word gives you the definition of it. It's going to be a shadow on the edge. Okay, so if they show you a shadow, you have two possibilities. You have edge shadow as being an artifact, or you have shadow as being the other artifact because they both have shadows. All right. So these two can sort of become a little bit tricky. The thing is that edge shadow tells you, hey, I'm a shadow on an edge. So your clue here is look for that edge. If you see a shadow, let's say like this, trace it back to its origin, trace it back to its origin. And if you trace it back to its origin, and then you end up seeing some sort of tissue, tendon, muscle, like right there, that's kind of curved. Oh, it's an edge shadow. Okay, so you trace it back to its origin. Another one is when you do the gallbladder in transverse and it looks round. You'll notice that you'll get this. And I remember I freaked out when I first scanned my gallbladder and I was practicing and I did transverse and I saw this because I was like, oh my God, where are the stones? Where are the stones? Where are the stones? Because I see two little shadows from each side. So I was like, damn, and I have two on top of that, you know. So I started scanning the heck out of that gallbladder, trying to find the stones, and I never found them. Well, the thing is, I was never going to find them. These were edge shadows, because look where they're coming from, the edges of my gallbladder. Okay, so anytime you see a shadow, just trace it back. Okay, trace it back to its origin. And if you see something curved on there, that's an edge shadow. If there's nothing curved, then it's going to be just regular shadow. Okay. And the regular one, the regular shadow, normally, not always, but normally, if you see like a out of nowhere, boom, shadow, and it's not edge shadow, but just out of nowhere, just a dark shadow, it tends to be caused by something bright. Stones are bright, okay? Bone is bright, okay? And those tend to cause the strongest shadows. So if you see something bright and there's a shadow, chances are it's just regular shadow. For this, there is no bright, structure that you're looking for. You're looking for something curved. So that is the biggest key here. You look for something curved. And what causes this is refraction. So remember that refraction was the bending of a wave. And that's exactly what's going on here. The wave may be traveling straight down, and once it hits that curve, it bends. And when it bends, that's refraction, and that is attenuation while it's doing refraction, because it became a shadow anyway, right? And remember, what causes a shadow? Attenuation. So this curving of the wave made it weaker. And try to think of it as you getting off the highway and you're on the ramp. When you go on the ramp, you always have to slow down. Like you can't go 60 miles per hour on a ramp, right? So you have to slow down. So think of that as being your weakening. Once you hit that curve on the ramp, you slow down to deal with it. So think of it as you're getting, the curve is weakening you. It's forcing you to slow down. So with this, it's that refraction, which is the bending. And once it bends, it loses energy. And that's why it becomes a shadow. Next one is enhancement. So enhancement is actually the opposite of shadow. Okay, and enhancement only happens posterior to anechoic structures. Okay, so in enhancement, you look for that anechoic structure, and posterior to it is going to be bright. Okay, it's going to be bright, which is the opposite of shadow, because shadow, normally, it's something bright that causes a dark shadow. This one is something anechoic that causes something to look bright. Okay, so you look for that cystic structure. And after it, posterior to it, you're going to see this bright area, and that is enhancement. So in this one, it is due, which is the opposite of the shadow. The shadow is caused by a high attenuation. This one is caused by a low attenuation, or maybe even a lack of attenuation. Okay. And the way it works is this, which is actually pretty cool. So you have a wave here, a wave here, and a wave down the middle. Okay, you have those. Let me make them a different color. You have a wave here, and a wave here. The waves on the left and the right are going through tissues as they travel deeper. The wave in the center is going through this cystic structure and then it's going to get to the other end, okay? Because it's still going to travel deeper as well. The thing is that these two waves on the side are experiencing attenuation because they're going through tissue. So over here, the tissue will look like this. Over here, the tissue will look like this. And over here, the tissue will look like this, right? That's attenuation. As it goes deeper into the body, it gets weaker and weaker and weaker. So the tissues look darker and darker and darker, okay? So by the time it gets to this part down here, it's going to look dark. So let me color this in a bit. This is how the tissue will look. Now, what about the wave in the center? The wave in the center went through that cystic structure. That cystic structure did not weaken it. Low attenuation. So it did not get weaker. So the strength of this wave up here remained the same. So once it got down here, it kept that same strength because it did not get weaker. And that's how you get that bright area posterior to the cystic structure while everything around it is getting darker. So it gets a free ride, okay? And it makes it look even brighter because it's all relative, right? So I'm somewhat tanned, right? My skin tone is somewhat tanned. If you stand me next to really, really, really pale people, I'm gonna appear dark, right? It's always relative, right? So this posterior enhancement, it looks bright because that wave didn't get weaker. So that wave kept its strength. So once it got to the other side of the cystic structure, it was still strong. And if it's strong, it will make a strong reflection, which is bright. Okay, so that's one reason. Then the other factor is the things next to them are darker. So then that makes it look even brighter than what it is. All right. So if you are testing your elevational resolution, remember elevational resolution? If you're testing your elevational resolution and you have a little bit of dirty shadowing inside, oops, and you're wondering if that shadowing is something real or if it's slice thickness artifact, something that's not real, and after that cystic structure, you see enhancement, that means that these dark shadows are fake and you have slice thickness artifact. Because if those shadows were real and those were actual tissues, and sludge or blood in there, then those things would weaken the wave. And if it weakens the wave, how is it that I'm getting enhancement? I only get enhancement if my wave does not get weaker. Okay, so that's the trick to sort of figuring out if those reflections are real or not. Okay. So that's enhancement. And you want to anything that's cystic, so gallbladders, vessels, heart chambers, the bladder, actual cysts. If you're scanning ovaries and and the patient has multicystic ovarian syndrome or polycystic, excuse me, that's where you're going to see a whole bunch of cysts, and you'll see this enhancement behind every cyst. If you see a cyst and there's no enhancement and you see a little bit of shadows inside, then it's like, okay, well, this cyst has something inside because I'm not seeing that enhancement. Now you have focal enhancement. This one is just this side to side band, and it's just this very bright band. So in the book they give you the parasternal long axis of the heart. Okay, this parasternal long axis, and then right here they make it super, super bright. Bright. And that is also where your focus, at least in this image, that's where your focus is. So this focal enhancement, remember, think about enhancement, it's supposed to look bright. But now they call it focal enhancement, which is at a particular region. And it normally is where your focus is. So what's happening is that you have a bright reflector. And you have your focus there. Okay. And yeah, focus is about lateral resolution, okay? But focus, if you remember your beam shape, your focus is where the beam becomes the most narrow. That is because all of those waves that started out apart have now combined. So that's why they becomes narrow, because you had all these waves that were separate that slowly merge. And at the focus is where they all merge together. So you have all these different intensities that are now focused in one area. So your focus is your area of highest intensity because all of the waves have come together at that single point. Okay. So you have this bright reflector that's going to make things look bright. And on top of that, you have your strongest beam intensity hitting that bright reflector. So that's why it looks so bright, because it's the perfect storm for a strong reflection. Okay. There's nothing else that looks like focal enhancement, so nothing for you to really worry about besides that. Just remember the name and what it looks like. I don't even think you have to understand what I just said, but I like to explain because if it makes sense, then you will for surely remember it. The other one is mirror image, and this is where things just start getting funky. I'm not even gonna lie. Okay, I remember when I was studying these artifacts, I just said to myself, how am I gonna remember all of these guys, you know? And I'm not teaching this from memory, by the way. Just so you know, like I always bring out the book if it's something that I don't normally teach. I did my work so I understand them. But yeah, I'm not saying these from memory. So just FYI, I'm not I'm no hero over here. So when I was studying these, I just started getting confused because some of these started sounding like very similar, you know? So you just have to find the small little differences. So for mirror image, excuse me, for mirror image, and this is why it gets funky, it's going to create a duplicate. So now we're in the world of things are being duplicated. You know, before it was, oh, it looks like this, it looks like that. That's it. Now it's, oh, we're duplicating stuff. We're cloning things. But I like mirror image because mirror image, if you think about a mirror, that's exactly what a mirror does. It duplicates whatever you put in front of it, right? You stare at it, now there's two of you, right? So interesting psychology case. If you ever watch House MD, the show House MD, which is really great, he does this. So there's an amputee who lost his hand, I think in a war or something, and he suffers from pain in that hand. Okay, always in pain, always in pain, always in pain. Takes medication for life. And House being House kidnaps the guy just to heal him. Okay, that's his way. And he puts this box. I know this is off topic, but I don't know. It's just interesting, so I want to share it. He puts two boxes. And the guy's scared because he's kidnapped. It's not like he knows, you know, what's happening. He's just scared because he's kidnapped. And in one hand, in one box, excuse me, he puts his hand. In the other hand, he puts the arm that's amputated. Okay. And there's a mirror like somewhere here. And I don't know how the setup is, but there's some mirror setup here. So in this box is closed. Um, how is it? It's for some reason, like he can't see his amputee hand. He can only see the reflection coming from here. So in this box, he sees this, the guy. And House tells him, ball your hand up into a fist. And the guy is scared. He doesn't want to do it, but he tells him to do it anyway. So he tells him, ball your hand up into a fist as tight as you can, as tight as you can, as tight as you can. So when he does that, he sees his real hand balled up into a fist, and he sees the mirror reflection also balled up into a fist because it's a mirror reflection. And then he says, as tight as you can, as tight as you can, as tight as you can. And he says, let it go. And then he opens his hand. And when he does that, his pain goes away. And then he removes the whatever lid he had, and he sees his amputee hand, but he's no longer in pain. So what he did is he tricked his brain into thinking that his right hand, the one that's amputated, was also being balled up into a fist. And then when he let it go, it did something to the nerves, right? Like just released the nerves. So pretty cool. And it's I believe it's also this is based off of a study. Yeah, really cool. So all of that to say this, a mirror image is going to create a duplicate. All right. And in order for you to recognize that is a mirror image, you need a mirror. Okay. Yeah, it's going to be cool. It's going to be cool, Remy. You need a mirror. Okay. So you need to look for that mirror. Your mirror will be a bright reflector. That's how it will look in the body. Okay. So you look for this bright reflector. In the book, they bring up the concept of a needle. And a needle will create a bright reflection. And then they give you a cyst right here. And all of a sudden, when you insert that needle, you see this down here. Okay. So again, it creates a duplicate. But in order for you to call it a mirror artifact, look for that mirror. It makes sense that you need a mirror to create a duplicate. And this will be a completely symmetrical duplication. All right. So these two cysts will look exactly the same. Not only that, they will be the same distance apart from that mirror. It's very symmetrical. It's almost like art. Okay. So that you need to find that bright reflector. And if you see something that looks identical on both sides of that bright reflector, and they're equally far apart from that center line, that's basically it, from that center line, then this is a mirror image. Okay. This happens with a needle, and this also happens with vessels. You have this here, and then you're going to have this here. Okay. That is a mirror artifact. Okay. Because there is no blood down here, but this blood that you see down here is the same one from up here. Okay. And what is your bright reflector? Right here, the vessel wall. Aren't vessel walls bright? And look, it's right in between both of them, and then you'll see that same equal space. The only reason why the bottom one looks a little bit smaller is because my box stops there, my color box, right? So I cannot have color outside of a color box. I only have it within the color box. But again, mirror artifact, okay? So this one, I'm okay with this one because of that one little clue. And your artifact, the one that's fake, is the one that's deeper. Okay. Sorry, give me 1 second. All right. Sorry about that. So that is a mirror artifact. Okay. Remember crosstalk from Doppler that I said it looks like a sunset? And I said, look, this is a mirror artifact. Your sunrise, excuse me, your horizon is your mirror. Okay. So that's another one that it's also considered a mirror artifact. The real name is crosstalk, and then remember the two reasons why you have it. So it just comes back again. That's mirror. Okay. Speed error. This is where it's like this is where it just gets, yeah. This is something else. Speed error is a little bit hard to understand, and it's even harder to catch, or at least I don't even look for it on when I'm scanning because I don't know. It's one of those artifacts that it's cool though. It's cool. It's just like if you forget one of these, I don't mind if it's this one kind of thing. But um, there's just a few things to note here. Okay, the assumption for this one is that 1540 meters per second that I spoke about earlier. So what happens here is that there is a speed error, propagation speed error. Okay. So tissues have different propagation speeds. We think it's 1540, but some tissues change. So some tissues are going to be slower than 1540. Some tissues are going to be faster than 1540. Okay. I think what you would have to remember is when the speed of that tissue is slower, your tissue will be displaced deeper. And when the propagation speed in the tissue is faster, your tissue, whatever that tissue is, will be displaced shallower. Okay. I wouldn't get into more details about this. Okay. The way that the ultrasound machine, excuse me, the book gives you an example is that you have some tissue like this, and out of nowhere, boom, you have this drop, and the tissue continues. This sudden drop. And nothing in ultrasound that I know of looks like this. Like everything is always continuous. Yeah, it curves and does and stuff like that, but there isn't really this drop like that. Like if somebody just cropped this part, okay? So what's happening here is that in this case, this tissue, I would assume, has a slower propagation speed. So instead of being up here, because the propagation speed is slower, the reflections went back to the machine at a different time, a longer time. Okay. So the machine says, well, if it took longer for you to get here, then you must be deeper in the body. And then it just moved it and put it deeper in the body. All right. So again, I'm not sure how much you need to know about this, but I would keep it this simple. Another name for speed error is a range error. And that's not too bad because the 13 microsecond rule is the range equation. And that deals with the location of things based on the propagation speed of 1540, that assumption. Okay. So this one is not too bad with the name. All right. But I wouldn't look into more of this. If you can understand this, then you're fine. And that's if you're asked this question. Okay. Now for the lobes, you have side lobes and grading lobes, and this is another little tricky one. Side lobes and grading lobes. So side lobes and grading lobes are actually the same thing. It's just that a side lobe is for a mechanical transducer, while a grading lobe is for an electronic transducer. Okay, but they're the same thing. All right. Um, I'm not sure if I'm not sure. Did I go over? Did this pop up some other time? Did I go over like ways to fix it? I know tissue harmonics is a way to fix it, but did I at least bring up the words apodization and subdicing? Okay. Okay. Yeah, I don't remember. All right, so I'll bring it up now. Okay. So side lobes and grading lobes, there are a few ways to fix it. Um, tissue harmonics is one way to fix it. Tissue harmonics. Um, I believe coded excitation. Actually, let me look up coded excitation because that's one of those terms that always gets tossed around. I know you're around here. It improves signal to noise ratio. No, so it wouldn't be coded excitation. Okay. I thought it would, but it wouldn't. So let's scratch that off. Harmonics is one of them. But the other two that are like specifically pointed out are apodization and subdicing. Okay. So apodization, I'm not even sure if you have to know what they are. I'll try to summarize them in a few words just so that you kind of have it there. Apodization messes with the electrical current, like how strong you make something. So this, you can say that it adjusts the channel because the channel is where the electrical current is flowing through. So like each little PCT has a channel, and that channel kind of controls everything that PCT does, okay? Including the electrical current. Subdicing, this one's a little bit tricky. Subdicing is when you further divide the crystal into tinier pieces, and then you put a channel to each one. So I guess, you divide each crystal even further. So like each crystal gets divided even into smaller pieces. And I suppose it's so that you can have even more control over them. And each one gets a channel. And this is for electric. So I'm not sure if you have to really I'm not sure if you have to really know that, but those are the two words that, know that they exist and that they deal with side lobes and grading lobes. Just in case these words pop up in another question and you're wondering, oh man, could that be the answer? So if you can at least relate them to side lobes and grading lobes, then perhaps it can get you out of a tough spot. If you have another question that has nothing to do with this, but apodization is in there somewhere, you can easily eliminate it. So what happens is you have your crystal. Well, let me draw it like this. You have your crystal. You have three crystals right here. And these three crystals, and I know I've drawn this before, each throw out a beam. You notice how in the center they're starting to overlap. And the sides, there's nothing there. So these side lobes and grading lobes are created by this part of the wave that is just out there alone, okay? So if I were to redraw this, and draw it like this, one big crystal, and then it takes my beam shape. Over here, there are actually those side lobes or those waves that just keep going into the body. Now, these waves are very weak because nobody's joining with them to make them strong. Only the main beam axis ones are getting strong. But there might be a reflection, excuse me, there might be a reflector like a tissue or a bone or a stone, some sort of reflector that all it needs is a little bit of a wave to create a reflection that goes back into the transducer. Okay. The machine assumes that all reflections come from your main beam axis right here. So the machine says anything that comes back to me is from my main beam axis. So when you have this little bright reflector return an echo, the machine says, oh, I have a reflection. You must be in my main beam axis. Okay, so it's going to create this side by side duplicate. That is what's going to create. It's not going to put it deeper or shallower. Okay, that's not going to happen because there's nothing about propagation speed here, which is what influences where something is. This is simply duplicated and moved to the main beam axis. It's supposed to be on the side, but because I assume that things do not come from the side. Yes, yes, Anna, to answer your question. For grading lobes, it would be an array transducer, okay? Now, I'm not sure about annular arrays because annular array is, let me see. Oh yeah, it would be annular array because annular arrays are electronically steered, mechanically focused. So yeah, any array. All right, so you have this reflector that's on the side outside of your main beam axis, but because it created a reflection, the machine says you must be within my main beam axis because that's what the rule says. So it just creates this duplicate and puts it right next to it. It's just that it moves it in the center, but right next to it, okay? So you're looking for this side-by-side duplicate. Now the book gives you a picture of what one looks like. It basically has this bright reflector and the image is like this. Oh wait, not too much. Okay, and there's this bright reflector that ends here, okay, and it's on the side. But it's so bright and it came from a weak reflection from the side that the machine went ahead and created another little piece next to it. And it puts it right in the center. So it took this reflection from over here and it duplicated it and put it right in the center here. So then you have this extension that shouldn't be there. Okay, so they're not the easiest ones to spot, honestly. I kind of just, it's not that I give up on these, but in some ways I kind of do. But it's good to know the definition of side lobes and graded lobes, and then the ways to fix them. Okay, so it just creates this side-by-side duplicate. That's it. And it's created because that reflector got moved to the main beam axis. Okay, it just got duplicated to the main beam axis. So if you go by what I put here on the board, I think that's pretty fine. I think that's fine. Since we're getting into the world of duplicates, for the mirror image, you look for that bright reflector, okay? Look for that bright reflector that's right in the center. So that one is very, very symmetrical. So that's your key for mirror image. Side lobes, nothing symmetrical about it, okay? So if it just creates this duplicate and it's side by side, it might be side lobes, okay? And the reason why I say might is because now you have the refraction artifact. This one also creates a side-by-side duplicate. So it's just like side lobe artifact that creates a side-by-side duplicate. The key here is that you need to look for a curve structure. So just like edge shadow, now you need to look for that curve structure, which is caused by attenuation and refraction. Okay, this one refraction, you also need to look for that curve structure. But in this case, instead of a shadow like edge shadow, you're looking for a side-by-side duplicate. So in the book, they give you this like curved tissue up here, and all the way down here, you have two SMAs, superior mesenteric arteries. Okay, but they're just side by side to each other. Okay, so what happened here is that the wave came down and it curved. Okay, so this one is the real one, and this one is the fake one right there. Okay, so if you see this duplication of something that's next to each other, first you want to look for that bright reflector to see if it's a mirror. In this case, there's nothing in between them. They're just literally side by side to each other. Okay, so then you're like, okay, well, it could be a side lobe artifact because side lobes, does that thing where it puts it side by side. So that could be one. So then your next clue is look above it. Just start looking above it little by little, little by little. And if you see something that's a little bit roundish and curvish, refraction artifact. Okay. So it's that side by side duplicate. Oops, duplicate. But that key is you're looking for that curve structure. Okay, that is the key for it. And I know things can start getting a little bit confusing, but with practice, uh, you'll get it because I'm just giving you a few words, and these little key words will definitely make a difference. You'll be able to spot the difference by just knowing these little key words. Okay, so that's refraction. Anything that bends, because the book tells you that refraction artifact degrades lateral resolution. So does side lobes artifacts. So anything that starts messing with side by side is going to be bad for your lateral resolution, because lateral resolution is supposed to be the accuracy of things that are side by side. Okay, so if all of a sudden you're creating duplicates that are side by side, then that's messing up my side by side resolution. All right, that's just one little detail there. Again, I wouldn't stress so much about it. If you're going to go into artifacts, just have a nice, decent understanding. There you go. Just have a nice, decent understanding of what each of these, how they look and what causes them. And I think that if you just take these bullet points, maybe put them on a note card, on an index card, right? I think you can just knock them out because they're not so bad, okay? And then the last few in here are actually pretty easy. They talk about slice thickness artifact. They talk about axial resolution artifact. Well, I mean, not right artifact. And lateral resolution artifact. And we already spoke about these. Remember that axial resolution is that parallel. And if you have bad axial resolution, it looks like a elongated, stretched vertically. And lateral is that side by side. And if you have poor lateral, it looks like that elongated horizontally. So this is basically what the artifacts will look like. Now, the book doesn't give you real world examples of this. Okay, like, oh, look, this tissue is elongated. So no need to worry about that. Just keep that in mind of how it looks, but that's back in the other chapter, so we're fine. And then the slice thickness is when you get that dirty shadowing inside the cystic structure, right? So that's something else to remember. And then there's like a multipath artifact, a curved and oblique structure artifact. The multipath, you cannot tell on the machine, how it looks. So I don't even worry about it. I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. If I cannot even tell it, how do I even know it's there? So that's just my way of thinking. Um, and the curved and the oblique reflectors artifact, that one is actually pretty cool. But I wouldn't worry about it either. It's like it's so on the end of things that I would say focus on these first, right? Just focus on these first and get these down packed. If you're worried about those last two and you haven't even understood these, first 7 or 8 or something, then no, that's not, no, prioritize these first. Those last two, I wouldn't, honestly, if I take the SPI and they ask me about those two, I'll just get them wrong. I wouldn't even like waste my time because I rather play the odds, right? And the odds are that they'll ask me about the other ones, not these. So it's all about less information. For temporal resolution and low frame rate, it's just a lagging. So if you have bad temporal resolution, you'll just see a lagging of a instead of you following the movement of something, it just starts to lag, right? Because temporal resolution, frame rate are about taking pictures and you're able to see a smooth movie, right? And if you cannot see this nice flowing movie and it starts lagging, then that would be your temporal resolution artifact. They don't go into crazy details about it. They just kind of tell you like a small definition. For the spatial resolution artifact, it's about how much detail you can see. They don't go into a lot of detail about that either. They just kind of go over what gives you good spatial resolution. And we spoke about the pixel density, the line density, fill in, interpolation. We spoke about that before. So they just kind of go into um, like, hey, remember this. The scan lines on the horizontal display, I would just, at the end of that, I just wouldn't worry about it. The range ambiguity artifact, that one can get confusing with the speed error artifact. So because of that, don't worry about it. Okay. Um, Trust me, if you start reading that one, then you're gonna get it confused with the other one. Okay, because they deal with the same idea. It's just that range ambiguity is the wave comes back way too late, and now it's assumed that it's in the next pulse. So it just starts getting a little bit tricky because you remember how you have the PRP, that you have your pulse goes out, then there's an off time, then your pulse goes out, then there's an off time. In this off time, everything is supposed to come back to me in this off time. And this is determined by depth, right? So if I am deep in the body, then I have a big off time because I have to wait for everything to come back. There may be something that comes back from this post that should have been here, but it came back a little bit too late, and now it comes back here. Okay, so that reflection that should have been here should have came back like right before you send out the other post, which would mean it is very, very deep in the body because it came almost at the last second. Okay, so it took a very long time to come back. That's why it's deep in the body. But instead, it came back after the next post was sent out. And it came back like immediately after the next post was sent out. So now the machine gets, the machine doesn't get confused. The machine just follows logic. But now the machine says, I just sent out this post and this reflection came back right after I sent out the post. So if it came back really quickly, you must be shallow because you came back really quickly. So that's where, again, that's why it starts messing with the speed error one. So I wouldn't worry too much about this one. If you get it wrong and move on. All right. We're not trying to get a 700 here. We're trying to pass. So it's okay. It's okay for you to go in there and look at some questions and say, I have no idea what these are. That's completely okay. Then for noise, speckle, and clutter, we talked about signal to noise ratio. So honestly, these things I wouldn't really worry about too much. Clutter is a form of noise that just starts messing up your image. It starts looking a little bit foggy. That's what kind of like noise looks like, foggy. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. If anything, just read it once, try to put it in your own words. That's about it. Acoustic speckle is like one little definition. That is the construct is the is noise from the constructive and destructive interference of wavelets. So those there's destructive and constructive, and those things are happening, and they create this what they call acoustic speckle. Again, I wouldn't stress it too much. Okay, from this chapter, if you can remember the majority of the artifacts, that should be enough to get you through most of the artifact questions, which aren't really that many. All right, so knowing those is already good enough to some extent. Um, I did not could someone tell me if I discussed tissue phantoms? Because I believe I didn't. Tissue phantoms? No? Okay. So tissue phantoms is not in this chapter, but I like to cover it because you will get some questions on that. And they're simple, to be honest. And they could be simple, some simple points. So tissue phantoms are for quality assurance, okay? And quality assurance, we're trying to make sure that the machine is working well, right? So they bring this fake tissue, and it could be like a block. And inside this block, it looks like tissue, so it's like grayish. Once you put the transducer on there, it looks grayish, and it's supposed to mimic tissue. And inside this block, they'll put different things in here. So one thing that they can put are bright, here we go. They can put these little bright pins, okay? These little bright pins. And they know exactly where they put these bright pins, right? They created this block of tissue. So they know exactly where things are. Remember, the ultrasound machine is giving you this look into the body, and it's telling you where things are. How do we know it's accurate, right? There's every time you scan, there's no way of you double checking your work. There's no way. You can't say that gallbladder, it is exactly that distance away from my transducer, or it is exactly that big, or that mass that I saw is exactly that distance away from the kidney, or it's in the superior pole of the kidney or inferior pole of the kidney. You cannot double check that. Now you can do a CT, that kind of stuff, and then they'll look at it on there as well. Okay, but they also cannot double check their work. The only way to double check your work is to open up the patient, because then you'll see it. Oh yeah, look, there it is. All right. So with these tissue phantoms, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to measure the accuracy of the transducer. So they create this block of tissue and they put pins on there. And they'll put a pin, let's say right here. And they know that this pin is 4 centimeters away. And they know that this pin is this much of a length, this much of a width, right? This much of a shape. They know that because they put it there beforehand. So when they scan it on the transducer and you see it on your screen, they look at the screen and they say, okay, is it the depth? Is it where we put it? The size? Is it the size that we know it is? And that's quality assurance. Okay. So that's how they double check things, which is great, right? It's definitely great. And by the way, this is a job. This is a physics in what is it? Something physicist is the title. It's people who go and check the accuracy of these machines. It's something physicist. Okay. So for tissue phantoms, they may ask you what resolution is being measured here. Okay. If you get something that looks like tissue, like grayish, right? Grayish like tissue. And you see these bright pins like this, okay? This is axial. They're measuring for axial. Look, they're parallel on top of each other, and they're slowly getting closer and closer together. And they're trying to see at what point does it look like one blob. Because we know there are two pins there. So once we get to the point where it looks like one, that's it. That's our axial resolution has reached its max. We it's not accurate anymore. Okay, so that's axial. Just that vertical, and they get closer together. This one is lateral. It starts out vertical, but then it starts to curve, and it looks like the letter L. L for lateral. L for love. L for lateral. Okay, so that one is lateral. This one is contrast resolution. Notice how it's different shades of gray. That is what contrast resolution is. Different shades of gray. Okay. And the last one, don't get it confused. This last one is going to look like this. This one is elevational. Okay. Do not get it confused with contrast resolution. I understand that you have these round structures. Okay. But for elevational, it would be cystic and then with some little bit of grayish inside. Okay. But it's still cystic in the background. Okay. Right here. You can still tell that it's sort of like a cyst at the base. For contrast resolution, they will be round, but they'll be completely filled in with a shade of gray. There's not going to be a little bit of black and shade of gray. No, no, no. Completely filled in with a shade of gray. Okay. And those are all the tissue phantoms that you need to know. Those could be easy, boom, boom questions. Now that's for tissue phantoms, for tissues. Then you have Doppler phantoms. I don't know much about Doppler phantoms. The only thing that I know is that Doppler phantoms are measuring Doppler. Doppler is movement. That's why it cannot be a tissue phantom. Tissue phantoms are just tissue, stationary. So for Doppler phantoms, in the name, they tend to have in the name some word that implies movement. Like one of them is called like a belt something phantom. Another one is called like a circular something phantom. Okay, so the name kind of like implies a belt is like for your car, like you have a belts on your car that move the engine. So they tend to have names in there that imply movement, and sometimes they use water, right? They put water in these phantoms and make it run and run and run, and that's how you put Doppler on it because it's movement. Okay, I'm not sure if you'll get asked about that, but just FYI, tissue phantoms are for these resolutions. They're not for Doppler. Okay, because these are just tissues that don't move. How can you measure Doppler in a tissue that doesn't move, right? All right. Congratulations. You are now the graduates. January 2023. Whoop, whoop. Um, so I'll keep the recording on because I want to, keep this in here so you guys can hear it later. what should you be doing now? Um, you should be going back to read the book. Okay. You should be going back to read the book and to rewatch the videos. Okay. So right now, it's all this information. All right. You at least this information is somewhere in your head. Now, when you go back to kind of make it stick in your head. Okay. So you go back, you read a chapter, you watch the video, or you read a chapter, you watch the video. Okay. As you're doing that, do the practice questions in the back of each chapter, not the back of the book, in the back of each chapter. Okay. So go back, rewatch the videos, reread the book. I know it's a lot of work. Don't get me wrong. If you don't have the time for it, at the very least, rewatch the videos. Okay. If you don't have the time for it, if you do have the time for it, just rewatch the videos and rewatch the book. It's 11 hours. Okay. So theoretically, if you do, um, well, each video is an hour more or less. So if you dedicate 2 hours a day, theoretically, if you dedicate 2 hours a day, you'll be done in 11 days. Okay. If you do 2 hours every other day, it might take you maybe 2.5 weeks or something. So even though it sounds like a lot of work, you could be done with that in about 2 weeks. All right. So go back, watch the videos, and read the corresponding chapter and do the questions on the back of the chapter. Okay. Once you do that, once you do that, you go into practice mode. You go to the back of the book and you knock out those questions. Okay. You knock out those questions. Now you're applying. Now you're kind of done with study mode and you get into practice mode. Okay. And you start knocking out those questions and you start writing down what you got wrong. Because some of those things that you got wrong, it's okay. They're probably not even going to be on the SPI. The book is just going to ask you everything. Okay. But it probably won't be on the SPI. But if you start getting certain concepts wrong that are very important, like resolutions, transducers, Doppler, if you get those wrong, then it's like, okay, I need to revisit those topics. Okay. So going back to read the chapter and watch the videos tries to make everything stick so that then you can apply it and see where you're still short on. That's basically what's happening there. So once you do those practice questions, and you feel good about it, then you can reach out to me and we can do a one-on-one so I can quiz you and see if there's anything that you should focus on. Or if you want to do more practice questions, then you can do like the uh, pre-pri app, that I always hear about, that I have it and the questions are good, or URR. But if you do URR, only buy the questions. Don't buy the course. Okay. This is the course, right? Like my course. You don't need their course. Okay. I've used URR for Echo and only for Echo. I don't know how they are with anything else. But my impression that I got is that it's not really a teaching platform for the material. They have great questions, but it's not really a platform to teach. So in the Echo that I bought, everything was just bullet points, just whole bunch of pages of bullet points, and it was just all information. It wasn't really teaching me. It was just like, know this, know this, know this, know this, know this. That's it for like pages upon pages upon pages. So I would say don't waste your money. If you need more practice questions, you can buy their questions, but buy the questions only, not the course. And it's actually kind of cheap. It's like $40 and you get like 700 questions or something. But the pre-pri app is free and you get, I don't know, 100 questions or 200 questions, I don't know. So, try that first. So that's the goal. You go back now, you reread, you rewatch to make sure that whatever you missed, now you catch it again and you're practicing a little bit as you're doing that. Okay. And then you go in and do the questions in the back of the book. Okay. This course was quite extensive. It's more than what I do in my weekend crams. So as you're reading the book, it's just for you to be familiar with the way they write things. Okay. The videos are, I would say that would be the priority. And then the reading the book is that supplement, for you to kind of just have it, for repetition. Okay. But the videos are the ones that are going to make it click in your head. Reading the book is just for that repetition. Okay. So that's why I'm saying read the book, just for that repetition, and then the practice. So that should be the strategy. If you're able to knock that out in 2 weeks, it will be a commitment. If you're able to knock that out in 2 weeks, that'll be great, because then possibly 3 weeks from now you can take your SPI. Okay, it will require a commitment, but if you can knock that out in 2 weeks, I think that'll be great, and then you can just knock out your SPI before the end of February. Okay, that could be like a good goal for you all to knock out the SPI if you don't have a date, to knock out the SPI before the end of February. I think that's plenty of time if you're able to go back and listen to this. Um, Listen, before I took my SPI, I read the book perhaps about 4 to 5 times. All right. So it's if you have the assumption that you can read the book once and that's it, that's not really it. Okay. The videos are going to be very helpful. So maybe you don't have to read it 4 or 5 times. Maybe just twice is good enough. Okay. Because you've been watching the videos and taking notes and stuff when you go back and you rewatch. All right. But what I'm saying is it is work, right? So I read it about 4 or 5 times, the book, and I did the questions. Okay. And then I did more questions. Okay. So it's when I took a real estate course last year. Okay. And I read the book about 4 to 5 times. It's a much, much thicker book, much thicker. Okay. Like crazy. And then in the back of the book had 1,000 questions, practice questions, the back of the real estate course book, 1,000 questions. I did them 3 times. All right. So it pays off. All right. It just really pays off. Did I want to do them? No, absolutely not. Did it take me a while? Yes, it took me a while. All right. But that's just me, right? I like to really, really prepare. I don't want to fail. So I like to really, really prepare. So if you have to just make that last push to do this, to reread and rewatch, and then do all those practice questions, it just betters your chances. That's all it's doing, is bettering your chances. So just to reiterate, videos are priority, book is supplemental, and you must practice. You cannot take that SPI without having to do the practice questions, at least in the back of the book. That is what's going to get your mind ready for those, the way things are worded. Does anyone have anything they want to share? Any comments? Anything before? Oh, let me just stop the recording.